Hi, I'm Queenie with Bullet Point News. I'm with Iain Lovatt, Mayor of Whitchurch-Stouffville, and we're going to talk about how Bill 23 affects Stouffville residents. Iain, welcome to Bullet News.
Thanks, Queenie. Good to be with you.
Nice to be with you. Stouffville's current population is about 50,000, and it's expected to grow to 88,000 in about 30 years. So housing needs to be built. Could you talk a bit about the town's housing strategy?
Yeah, so we're actually doubling in size. We're going to be close to 100,000. That 88,000, 100,000 number is a bit of a rounding error between the regional planners and our local planners. So I always comment on what our local planners are forecasting for. So 100,000 people. We have identified areas that are within the settlement area that can take this expansion, and also with recent MZOs that took place on the west side of Highway 48, there's certain growth areas that have been identified. So the Highway 48 corridor is one of them. 10th line is another. Musselman's Lake is also another one that will capture that growth over the next 30 years. And so, we have to phase that growth. We can't just obviously build homes for 50,000 more people in the next 10 years. And interestingly, as it relates to Bill 23, York Region's portion of the numbers of that 1.5 million homes that the province wants to see built don't include anything in Whitchurch-Stouffville or any additional homes. So there's a large conversation that's been taking place with my regional counterparts and staff around the phasing of growth. And also now there is significant pressure over the next 10 years to deliver over 400,000 homes in the region between Richmond Hill, Vaughan, Markham, and Newmarket. There has to be a phasing of infrastructure because there's not enough infrastructure in the ground at this time to accommodate that growth. So there's let's take that and park it for a second. When it comes to Stouffville, we have allocation for water and wastewater for probably about the next 10 years, and where we'll see roughly another 18,000 people move into our community in those specific growth areas that I've identified.
Okay. For those who don't know much about Bill 23 and how it affects Stouffville, could you give us some background, including what development charges are and what they pay for?
Sure. So we had a report that came to council on December 21st, which kind of outlined at that time the staff's kind of thinking on how Bill 23 was going to impact us. It touched on the Ontario Heritage Act and awaiting, the removal of heritage properties from our registry, permission of as of right zoning to allow 3 residential units on a lot. So if you wanted to, basically, if you bought a house and you wanted to tear it down, you could, as of right, build 3 units. There was some zoning requirements around major transit station areas, which we have 2 of in town, the Old Elm Station on 10th and the Main Street Station. There was a removal of site plan exemptions, and the removal of architectural and landscape details. So there was a lot of things that kind of covered off in Bill 23, but probably the one that's gotten the most attention in the media is around development charges. And so development charges are a fee that's collected by the municipality, both locally and at the region, to pay or to try and offset the cost of development. So these are for brand new homes that are being built. And so there's 2 things that, before I go there, just to give you an example, a semi-detached townhome in Stouffville currently has a development charge fee of around $75,000. And 35% of that stays with the town, and the other 65% goes up to the region. And there's a scale. And every 5 years, the town goes through a DC background study, which basically looks at the cost of infrastructure for a 5-year window, kind of projects the growth and assigns a fee, a development charge to every new home. goes to water and wastewater, goes to roads, goes to libraries, goes to fire service, goes to parks. Like there's a bunch of different funds that the DC dollar gets divided into. So the challenge on a municipal sector is that the province has changed the DC funding model to a graduated scale. So before, when you pulled your building permit, DCs were payable. Now it's a graduated scale paid over 5 years. So that's a big change. The second big change is that on affordable housing and what the definition of affordable housing is. And so Bill 23 seems to imply that definition of affordability is now 80% of the average sale price in your community. So for us, that's well over $1 million. And so, I don't know how that's affordable. The previous definition, and probably the most commonly used definition, was 30% of your gross income going towards housing, whether that's rental or a mortgage. But that's been kind of flipped on its head a little bit with this new definition. And by definition, it removes a lot of the development charges that we will be able to collect. So that's really challenging.
At a council meeting on January 11th, Stouffville Council officially voiced its opposition to Bill 23. Why?
Because in its current form, the way that some of these financial details have been presented, we can't support it. There's no question we support the growth that's required. We're a growth municipality. Like, we're going to double in size. So that's just, that's just our reality. So to say no to growth is kind of, we actually can't, but it's kind of silly to do that. But in the current form of Bill 23, it's really challenging for us because we only have $24 million in our DC reserves. And there's this misnomer that growth pays for growth. Well, it doesn't. And, I'll argue with anybody that says that it does. There's just not enough money collected to pay for the infrastructure that's required. And to put that burden on our existing residents and current taxpayers, I think, is just the wrong solution. I'll give you an example. When we get a subdivision is built, so all the pipes go in the ground and the road is paved, that subdivision stays with the developer probably for 8 to 10 years before it's turned over or assumed by the municipality. A road has a 25-year lifespan. So we assume the road 10 years into its life cycle. And so we have to start planning for the repaving of that road, not 25 years from when we get it, but 15 years. So in a growth municipality like Stouffville, think about that spread out over, hundreds of kilometers of streets that are being created in greenfield development that we are going to be responsible for. It's an unsustainable business model. I understand what the province is wanting to do. We have a housing crisis. We need to do something to try and get, people closer to home ownership, and certainly see more purpose-built rentals built, because that's the other side of the conversation, which we don't nearly have enough of in Whitchurch-Stouffville. But it is a big, big challenge, and penalizing the municipalities is not the way to go about doing it.
So with Bill 23 in its current form, when new homes are being built, how much of the DCs will be paid by developers?
Well, it's a great question because it all depends on the DC bylaw of the day. So the report that was presented to council on the 21st of December was based on our current DC bylaw. We're going through a review right now. And for the years 2024 to 2028, it shows that we will be in a deficit of over $19 million of DCs that we would have collected. And so that's a really easy talking point. That represents a 52% tax increase for the residents of Stouffville if we wanted to make that up. And that's just unsustainable. I mean, there's not a world I live in where we're going to see taxes be going up 52% over the next 4 years to cover the cost of development that we're getting swept up in with Bill 23.
You wrote a letter to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing voicing your concerns with regard to Bill 23. What did he say?
I don't know. He hasn't responded. So that's a little disappointing. But, listen, the province and municipal government need, regardless of who's in power, this is not a party thing. There needs to be a working relationship between municipalities and province. I am not one to kick my big brother in the shins. So just because I don't like something, I want to be proactive and bring solutions. And so the letter that I wrote to Minister Clark provided a strategy that I think could work to achieve what the province is wanting to do without hurting municipalities. And in a nutshell, the province is wanting to reduce DCs, which is fine, if the goal is to bring the cost of DCs off of the final closing cost of the house you've just bought. Criticism is that it's just a free ride for developers. So let's just say I buy a townhouse for $800,000 and there's $100,000 in DCs. That $100,000 savings in cost is just going to go into the developer's pocket and not benefit the actual homeowner. I presented a strategy to the minister that said, look, if you are going to make us whole, which the minister has said, he's publicly said in a letter to AMO in November that he was going to make municipalities whole through Bill 23. I interpret that as that $100,000 that we're no longer going to collect. We're going to be getting that from the province. My letter said, look, let us charge the $100,000. Let you as a new homeowner sign a form on closing that says that you are the purchaser of a new home in Stouffville, and that $100,000 is going to come off the purchase price of your home. Then the developer can take that form, submit it to the province, and get a credit back of that $100,000. So it's on the province to pay the developer the $100,000. The purchaser absolutely gets that $100,000 off the purchase price of their home, which is real, tangible savings in their pocket. And then the municipalities are made whole right out of the gate because we don't have to stop collecting DCs. Seems pretty reasonable to me.
Hmm. If taxes are going to increase by 52% over 4 years, who will be able to pay? Who will be able to afford housing in Stouffville? And will there really be that anticipated population growth?
Well, the answer is nobody. No one's going to be able to afford that. That's just unrealistic, unsustainable, unfathomable. I don't know how many unwords I can use. It's just, unrealistic. We will, and it's not just us, it's everywhere. Now, there are a lot of municipalities that have big reserves. And I think this is one of the things that Minister Clark was kind of addressing in some of his comments, is that there are municipalities like Toronto that have $2 billion in reserve funds. Well, I know that that's just not sitting in a piggy bank. They're not just collecting all these DCs, and that's all been allocated for future growth. We only have $24 million in our DC reserves. I mean, some of the infrastructure that's required within our municipality is in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So if we don't have the ability to collect that, it's going to be super challenging for us. And the prospect of raising taxes that much, we'll just see people leaving. And I'll go one further. And I've said this publicly too. If that were our reality, I think that we would basically put a complete moratorium on future growth.
The 2 Stouffville properties on the Greenbelt that have been opened up for development are on McCown Road, between Stouffville Road and 19th Avenue. How much infrastructure needs to be built if development occurs there? And if developers are paying reduced DCs, who will pay for that infrastructure?
Yeah, great question. So the infrastructure is already going in because the two very small parcels of the Greenbelt are just basically an expansion of white belt lands that have been approved in the settlement area through an MZO. So all of the infrastructure between Highway 48 and McCowan, and it's like halfway down between Stouffville Road and 19th, down towards the 19th border in Markham. All of that infrastructure has to go in the ground anyway. So there's not any extra cost to service, well, of consequence. There is obviously, more pipes that have to go in the ground to service that land, but it's inconsequential for the grand scheme of that block that's going to be serviced. Um, and yeah, if we're not allowed to collect DCs, it's council's going to make a tough decision. I mean, how are we going to pay for it? And without a clear path to those funds coming into the town, I mean, we work on a model right now, which a lot of municipalities don't. A lot of municipalities collect DCs go into a reserve, and then they pay for the infrastructure to go in the ground. We've been working off a model over the last number of years with new development where the developers have to front end the cost of the infrastructure, and then they take DC credits on the back end when they pull building permits. So, that's how I kind of see us navigating through a lot of the new development, even if the implications of Bill 23 are reduced DCs, the developer's still going to they want to sell their homes. They're going to have to put the services in. It's not something that we will upfront anymore.
Let's suppose the province decides to pay all the DCs so that the town doesn't have to increase taxes at all. Does development in Stouffville have to occur on the Greenbelt? Isn't there other land where housing can be built?
Yeah, well, off the top, I kind of mentioned where our development was taking place already, and there is more than enough land in the White Belt areas that were part of the MZO approval between 48 and McCowan, and then up 10th line. I mean, the redevelopment of the Smart Centers lands. There's land across the street to the north that's going to have residential, whole block of the MZO block, and then up 10th line. That's why I think there's a discrepancy between the regional planners numbers for us at 88,000 and our planners looking at 100. They're looking at the grand scheme of things and doing the atom up and realizing that we're going to exceed the 88,000 in the next 30 years. And I think we'll be in the 10 to 18,000 probably in the next decade if the servicing stays the way it is right now.
But does development have to occur on the Greenbelt?
Not in the lands that we're within Stouffville, no. It doesn't have to, but it's going to because of a decision of the province.
Okay. So council does not support Bill 23 in its current form. And of course, residents don't want their taxes going up by 52%. So what can Stouffville residents do about the bill?
I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but I don't think anything. Honestly, this bill received royal assent in November. We're still waiting for the regulations to be released about how the bill is going to impact us on a local level. But, the ship's left the harbor here. Like Bill 23 is happening. The province is focused on building 1.5 million homes in the next 10 years. And everyone that I'm talking to is going to find that to be a massive challenge. Even just on interest rates. I mean, the loans that developers are getting, we've gone up, 2 points, let's say, over the last 6 months. It's become more expensive for the development industry to carry the land, let alone the purchaser. There are a lot of people that bought homes a couple of years ago that are now seriously rethinking closing because that 2-point swing is, hundreds and maybe thousands of dollars to a mortgage payment. It's really, really challenging right now. So I think we'll probably see things just generically slow down right across the province when it comes to new homes being built. There are a number of developers I know in the region who have basically who've been active building. They're building what they committed to, but they're taking a back seat right now, waiting to see what happens with interest rates and see if a new floor is established with interest rates for mortgages. Um, we're not. It's not uncommon. You can talk to people who've lived in Stouffville for 30 or 40 years, and they remember double digit interest rates. They have happened before. So 4.5 for the bank rate right now is not unheard of. But when you're leveraged on a $2 million home, it's a big deal.
Even though perhaps Bill 23 can't be repealed, can Stouffville residents do something to change some of it?
I mean, I don't know, Queenie. Honestly, I mean, sure. I mean, you can, if you want, you can protest. But all signals from the province is they're moving forward with this direction, and there's no changing their minds on this. So what we really need to do, certainly on a political level, and on a municipal level, is when the OREGs drop, we need a full forensic look at what it means for us in town and how we're going to accommodate it. There are municipalities that are in this budget cycle right now are planning on contributing a Bill 23 tax in the tax levy. I know Markham is considering that 2% increase on their operating tax levy just to prepare for the impact of Bill 23. We're not in a position where we can do that, unfortunately. It's not going to impact us this year. Like, we're not going to see major tax hikes, double-digit tax hikes this year. But once we get the OREGs, we'll be in a better position to, really look at the financial impact and what that means for us moving forward. As the report said on the 24th, it was, 52% over 4 years. But in 2024, it's a $7.5 million DC loss, and that's a 20% capital levy increase. So even that's just unsustainable and unrealistic for us.
How are you going to communicate this to your residents? I mean, those who perhaps don't realize that it's the province who is forcing this upon them may think that it's you who's the bad guy.
Yeah, I've gotten the emails already. So, you can never over communicate when it comes to municipal politics, and you'll always be accused of not communicating enough. So that's why we're talking today, so hopefully your viewers are going to see this and realize that the implications of Bill 23, whatever they might be, to Whitchurch-Stouffville, it's a provincial bill that's, now legislation. It's nothing that we are looking at doing. And hopefully, people see that, I'm trying to be as proactive as I can and suggesting strategies to make us whole. If that's truly the province's intention, then I think we're going to be okay. But if things don't pan out that way, then there's going to be some serious challenges ahead. And like I said, council can just put a hold on everything. That's within our purview. There are consequences to doing that, obviously. We could get appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. The province could get involved, but I think we're a ways from that ever happening at this point.
Thank you so much, Iain. And we'll talk again about Bill 23, I'm sure.
I'm sure we will. Okay, Queenie, be well.